Hello, 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 hello. This is Marshall Goldsmith. Welcome to LinkedIn Live. This is produced by Methods. Methods is doing, I think, a fantastic job of creating content for the new world, a world where we can't be in person all the time, yet we can be close, where we can talk to and reach not just hundreds of people, but hundreds of thousands of people. So thank you to Methods for putting all this on. I'm going to briefly introduce myself and we'll get started. My name is Marshall. I, from Kentucky, went to school in Indiana, got a PhD at UCLA, and I was a college professor, a dean. I do leadership development, traveling all around the world. I coach executives. I've been the privilege of coaching a lot of the top leaders in the whole world. And then I write books and articles. And also I'm adopting people. So I'm adopting about 250 people, and my mission is to teach them all I know for free. And only price is when they get old, they get to do the same thing. When I came up with this idea, I was a little surprised when 18,000 people applied for adoption. So that's been amazing. And these are called 100 coaches. And one of them is going to be our guest today. His name is Michael Bungay Stanier. What a great guy. He has written a book called The Advice Trap. Now, Michael at Thinkers 50 was ranked as one of the top 8 coaches in the whole world of all types of coaches. He was also ranked #1 thought leader in coaching. So, I love your book. Your book is a very interesting combination. On one hand, I think it's profound, yet on the other hand, it's kind of paradoxical. It's very interesting, and the book is called The Advice Trap. And the Advice Trap is kind of a confusing title because advice is good. Advice is good.
Right.
Start with, what do you mean by the advice trap?
Well, here's the thing to say right away, Marshall. Advice is good. What is this conversation if not a moment of advice giving out to the tens of thousands of people who are watching this? So we need to get that on the table right away. There is a really useful place for advice. It is kind of the currency of civilization. It's how we get smarter and wiser, for sure. What the advice trap is that default response we have of wanting to leap in and start offering up ideas and solutions and opinions and actions before we really know what's going on. And here's what I know. Even though I know there's tens of thousands of people watching this, and even though I don't even know who any of them are, I know that they are all advice-giving maniacs. Marshall, they love it. Somebody starts talking. They've never really met them before. They don't really know what they're talking about. They don't know the situation. They don't know the context. They don't know the people involved. They don't know the technical specifications. And after about 10 seconds, they've got this thing in their brain. They're like, oh, I've got something to tell you. I've got something I want to offer you. I've got some solution I want to suggest to you. And what we're trying to do in the advice trap is to say, look, advice is good, but I want you to slow down the rush to action and advice giving. And I want you to stay curious just a little bit longer. That's my quest in life, getting people to stay curious just a little bit longer.
I've got a theory on this advice trap, and part of the advice problem. You can tell me what you think of it. As we've journeyed through life, we've taken test after test after test after test.
For sure.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to school in Australia. So I went to my high school in my local town in Canberra. And then I went to my university in Canberra, the Australian National University. Then I was lucky enough to win a Rhodes Scholarship. So I then went to Oxford and did a master's degree in literature at Oxford. I know, fancy pants. But yeah, I spent years. Oh, I think, can't you tell? Don't I radiate a kind of wise intellect?
Now you went to Oxford. Now, in Oxford, is that where they admitted the stupid ones or the smart ones? Whoa! Smart ones.
Well, you could go either way on that. Everybody thinks they admit the smart ones. Then they meet me and they're like, I don't know, maybe that's not what they do anymore. Who knows what's happening?
Well, here's my point. In your life, you've taken test after test after test with one goal: prove how smart you were. By the way, you didn't get into Oxford. Somebody thought you were damn smart. You may not have been, but they were delusional enough to believe you were.
Exactly.
You spent most of your life proving you were smart. I spent most of my life proving I was smart. Hey, look at me, #1 executive coach, #1 thought leader. Woo, we're smart. It's hard to stop. And back to the advice trap, I think it makes so much sense to me because A lot of advice has nothing to do with helping others. A lot of it's, let me prove to you how damn smart I am.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Marshall. I mean, there's kind of two levels in which we stay attached to wanting to give advice. And the first is just as you say, which is honestly from the age of 4 onwards, maybe earlier, we're like, let me give you the reward for being the person who sticks up their hand and has the answer. You know, you're like, I've got the answer. I've got the GPA. Your early career is all about proving you're a subject matter expert. So there's a lot of pressure to be the person who knows stuff in the room. But one
Michael,
of the things that we all know. Oh, sorry, Marshall. Yeah.
It's getting worse. I got 2 5-year-old grandkids. They're applying to, quote, what the hell they call it, kindergarten or something. I don't know what they call the damn thing.
Right.
You think they're going to Harvard. They're taking tests. They get in. They're 5 years old. They're 5 years old. It's just hideous,
like I say,
you know.
It is. And of course, there's some value to some understanding of where you stand in the world, and there's some understanding of tracking progress because we grow through feedback. And one of the things that tests can give you is feedback, so you can kind of orient and understand where you are. But of course, what it becomes is it becomes a game. I mean, I know when I was trying to pass tests and exams in university, I'm like, I don't care about the knowledge. I'm trying to play the game to pass the test. Because that's the thing, that's the win. But, you know, it's not just a habit. It's not just trying to deconstruct our habits that keeps us in this advice trap. It does go that level deeper, and you're pointing to it, which is there's just a whole bunch of kind of ego-driven reasons that make us want to be the person who is the smart person, who's in control, who's saving the world. That feeds and kind of gives us a lot of kind of, I call them wins, not wins in the book, because they're like, they help us in the short term, but we and others in our organizations pay a price for that in the longer term.
You know, in my book, what got you here won't get you there. I called it winning too much. So I think really, see, Michael, your idea was good, but I'm really smarter than you. So it was really my idea that you vaguely copied. So let's face it.
Right. Right.
Michael, you talk about the importance of staying curious. Number one, why is it so important? Why is it so important to stay curious?
There's a bunch of reasons. And actually, I'm going to flip the question to talk about why advice giving doesn't work so well. And it will kind of give the answer to why curiosity is helpful. So here's the first reason why you leaping in and offering up ideas and suggestions and opinions doesn't work, number one. And the first reason is you're probably solving the wrong problem. It is so easy to get seduced into thinking that the first challenge that shows up is the real challenge. And honestly, it almost never is. It's somebody's best guess. It's an early hypothesis. It's their stab in the dark. It's the first go at trying to talk about it. But really rarely is the first challenge the real challenge. But even if we just say for the sake of argument that somebody comes to you and they've got this perfectly articulated problem and it's the real thing and it's the hard thing and it's the thing that if you solved it would make the most difference. Here's the second reason why your advice is not nearly as good as why your advice doesn't work. And it's this: your advice is not nearly as good as you think it is. We've had this lifelong practice, just as Marshall's been saying, of going, look, this is how I win awards. This is how I get the pass mark by having the answer. But truthfully, our advice is a mishmash of half-remembered victories, half-remembered facts. The only stuff that's actually useful that you can remember, honestly, I can look up on Google faster and more clearly than that. And we have these cognitive biases that are there to design to make us feel that we're smart. So there's actually a cognitive bias called the, what is it called? Something like the Donning-Kruger bias, which means, to put it bluntly, this is how John Cleese, the comedian, put it: stupid people don't know that they're stupid. So the more confident you are about your advice, there's a chance that the worse your advice actually is. But okay, look, let's just say for the sake of argument, and I think it's unlikely, but for the sake of argument, not only do you have a brilliant insight as to what the challenge is, and not only do you have a brilliant solution, I mean, let's just say it's a perfect solution, and you're there. Here's the third challenge about why your advice doesn't work: because it may not be the appropriate act of leadership. You know, when you have this moment and you've got an idea about the challenge and the solution, you're at a crossroads. You could go one path, which is to be, I'm the person who gives them the answer. And the benefit of that is they get the answer. It's my answer. I'm obviously the smart person here. They go off and they implement it, and it will probably work because you are a smart person, and that's a good answer.
Sure.
The other option is you say, I'm going to help them figure this out. I'm going to trust that they'll get an answer that will be good enough. It might not be as good as my answer, but it will probably be good enough. And in that moment, you give the opportunity to empower others, to increase their sense of competence and confidence and autonomy and self-sufficiency. I mean, Marshall, we both know Alan Mulally, and we've both seen him stand up and talk about leading Ford through, you know, time of absolute crisis, you know, paramount to what it's like today, and go, my job as the CEO of Ford, even though we're losing $17 billion a year, can you imagine? I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of money, is to not give them the answer. I mean, if there's ever a moment where as a CEO you want to leap in and tell people to do stuff, it's when your company is failing and it's hemorrhaging cash and your leadership team is not performing the way you want. And one of the reasons he is a beacon and is revered as a leader and a CEO is in part because of his willingness to slow down the rush to action and advice giving, but really go, my job is to enable my people to come up with the answer and find the solutions.
You know, it's great. I think what he does is so very deep. I mean, as you recall his story, company's losing $17 billion, and they have this red, yellow, green chart. Finally, somebody says, red, you know, I'm lost. I don't know how to get there. And Alan said, let me assure you of one thing. I'm the CEO of the Ford Motor Company. I know less than you do. Then he said something to me even more profound. I don't know the answer, and you don't know the answer. Probably no one in this room knows the answer. They're all big executives. Why don't we find some smart young people who may actually know what they're talking about and get the answer from them? So not only is he not giving the advice trap, he's encouraging them not to fall into this advice trap. Now, my next question for you is, you talk about staying curious, a concept I love. Why is it so hard for us to do this?
Right. Well, we've talked a little bit about it because of the habit of being tested and going, well, I am measuring you for your knowledge from a very early age. But if you go beyond that and you get into some of those ego-driven things we're talking about, then here's what I call those. I call those your advice monster. You know what this is like. Somebody starts talking and your advice monster kind of looms up out of the dark and goes, oh, I'm going to add value to this conversation. Here I go. And we have these advice monsters, and we've got to learn how to tame our advice monster. Now, here's why I came up with this idea of the advice monster, Marshall. 4 years ago or thereabouts, I published a book called The Coaching Habit, and it was really successful. Right. It sold nearly 1 million copies. It's been the #1 book on coaching for this century, I guess. And what I noticed is that there were some people in this world who took that book, saw that there were 7 good coaching questions and information about how to build a coaching habit, and they took it and they ran with it. You know, they wrote out the questions on a card and they carried it around with them and practiced it, and they just incorporated it into the way that they worked, and they could see their impact in their leadership and their relationships changing for the good. But not everybody could do that. There were lots of people who read the book and went, Michael, it's a pretty good book. I like it in theory, but in practice, I am really struggling to move from being so advice-driven to being more curiosity-led. And that's what made me want to write this new book, which is like, how do we tackle that behavior change around trying, for the people who find it difficult, shifting their behavior, what's that about?
Right.
And there are 3 advice monsters. And for people listening, I want you to know that, I want you to listen out and listen to see which advice monster might be most real for you. Wait. But Marshall.
I forgot.
Yeah.
Everybody that has questions for Michael, I was supposed to ask this in the beginning, but I keep forgetting. Please write them in the chat box and send them in, and then Justin will read us the questions. My apologies, Michael. I was supposed to do that, but I forgot.
No problem. I know one of the questions is, how are 2 good-looking, so impossibly good-looking men like this on a chat at the same time? And for me, I can't answer for Marshall. He's just naturally beautiful. I've had huge amounts of plastic surgery. That's what's got me this far. But that's an aside. Let me talk about the 3 advice monsters. So 3 advice monsters, and you're going to hear at least one of those that really rings true for you. First advice monster is tell it. So tell it has convinced you that the way you add value is to give advice. You need to have all the answers. You need to have all the answers to all the things. And if you don't have all the answers, you're going to fail. And not only are you going to fail, but everybody's going to fail. So that's the first one, which is like that drive to go, I should know this stuff. I should know everything. The second advice monster is save it. Save it has sat you down and convinced you that your job is to make sure that nobody ever struggles, nobody ever stumbles, nobody ever fails, nobody ever finds it difficult. Your job is to rescue everybody. And if anybody does struggle, then you fail. And of course, they're failing because they're struggling. You've got to protect and rescue everybody. Now, just to be clear, it is impossible for you to have all the answers. It is impossible for you to save everybody. The third advice monster is called control it. It's the sneakiest of the three. And it's convinced you that the way that you add value is to make sure that you maintain control at all times. Never give up control. Keep your hands on the wheel. Keep your fingers in the pie. Don't give up control. Don't hand over control. Don't invite others in to take control. Because if you give up control, chaos will come and you will fail. And what I bet is all the people listening, you will recognize at least one of those advice monsters, probably more. And we all have these drivers because, to be fair, those behaviors of having the answers, of trying to save your people, of trying to keep control of the situation, that's actually been helpful for you in some situations in the past. But when it becomes your default response, when it becomes your kind of unspoken and unrealized driver, then it gets in the way of you being an effective leader, an effective person showing up in the world.
You know, I think everything you've just said is important for all leaders. I think the higher up you go, it doesn't become less important. The higher up you go, it becomes more important. One of my good coaching clients was J.P. Garnier. He was CEO of GlaxoSmithKline. I said, what'd you learn about leadership as a CEO of GlaxoSmithKline? He said, my suggestions become orders. And I said, if they're smart, they're orders. And if they're stupid, they're orders. If I want them to be orders, they're orders. If I don't want them to be orders, they're orders anyway. My suggestions become orders. For 9 years, I trained the admirals of the United States Navy. It was the first thing I teach you admirals. When you get that star, your suggestions become orders. Admirals do not make suggestions. When an admiral makes a suggestion, what's the response? Sir, yes, sir. That suggestion becomes an order. I asked JP, what did you learn from me as a coach that helped you the most as a leader? He said, you taught me one lesson that helped me be a better CEO and have a happier life. I asked him, what was that lesson? He said, before I speak, stop and breathe and just ask myself one question. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? And you know, Michael, back to your great book, I think really you make that point so well. Stop and breathe. Stop and breathe. Is it worth, before you give that advice, is it really worth it? And you know what the answer is, Lod? JP said half the time as the CEO of Glaxo, half the time if you had the discipline, you know what he said? It's not worth it. And you're not saying be always more curious, be a little more curious. JP didn't say, I never added value. What did he say though? I didn't always add value. He said, I used to always add
value.
Half the time I don't.
And sometimes
I'm better off.
Sometimes the way he added value, as do the best leaders in this world, is they sit there and they shut up and they hold the space to allow the people to do the work and figure stuff out. And they have added value by allowing that person to take ownership, to figure it out, to feel empowered, to feel that they have authority, to feel that they have accountability. Paradoxically, the way they have added value is by doing nothing. Because as soon as you step in and make an intervention, power shifts. There's a message that goes with any intervention, just like you're saying with JP Garnier or with your admirals. They're like, as soon as they say it, they're like, okay, he's back in control. They've made the call. My job's to follow the suggestion. And whilst that's easy to go, well, of course, but as CEO of GlaxoSmithKline, that's a huge pharmaceutical, or I'm an admiral of a Navy. I've got scrambled eggs, gold braid all over my uniform. But it is true even if you are a first-time manager and you're managing one other person. It is true if you're an individual contributor and you're like, I don't manage anybody, but I influence people. I'm in a room and there are people and we look to work together. One of the most powerful roles that you can play is as somebody who says, look, my job is not to be the person with the fast answer. I mean, it can be some of the time, but what if my job was to find out what the real problem was? What if my job was to make everybody in this room smarter because of the questions I ask? What if my job was to invite people forward and say, I see you. I see that you're capable of this. I want to invite you to take this on board. I'm going to invite you to be engaged in your own life and engaged in your own job in a way that you may never have been before. That is a powerful legacy. That's a powerful way of showing up, no matter where you fit in the hierarchy of whatever your organization might be.
I love that. You know, Justin,
Thank you, Marshall.
Before we continue, do we have perhaps a few good questions from the listeners?
Hello, Marshall. Hello, Michael. Yes, we have a number of good questions flowing in. Our first one here comes from Lakshmi Kampala. And she says, you talk about shifting your own behavior. What are good ways to deal with people who always feel the need to show off like they're the smartest person in the room, particularly the ones that you can't get away from that are close to you, like your family or your boss?
Okay, Michael, you go first and I'll give it a try.
Yeah. So a place that I start is I go, is this a battle worth fighting? Because you can't, I mean, honestly, in the end, you don't get to change other people's behavior. You just don't have that control. That's their choice to change it or not. You get to influence it. You get to influence it by how you show up and what you role model. You get to influence it by trying to have a feedback conversation, if you wish, with them, or to nudge them in a certain way. But it's really worthwhile going, look, is this going to be worth it? Or do I need to find a way of coexisting with this in a way that doesn't trigger me and have me behaving in a way that I don't want to behave? I mean, I look back on my career and I've had one or two bosses where I'm like, there's just no point in having that conversation. It's like, as I say, trying to wrestle with a pig. You're always going to lose and the pig walks away happy. You're like, so decide whether you want to wrestle the pig or not. And if you do want to wrestle the pig, if it is a relationship which is important enough and a relationship where you're like, I think there's an opportunity for a conversation, then you get to choose to go, look, I can do it by role modeling, by being curious myself, but that may not be enough. And then it's like, do you want to have that conversation with them where you get to make a request of, this is how I'd like you to be when you're with me. Like, I love your ideas. Sometimes they're really useful. But what would be really helpful for me is if you asked me one or two questions before you gave me your ideas. What do you think, Marshall? What would you suggest?
First, Lakshmi, send me an email, Marshall, with 2 L's at marshallgoldsmith.com. I'll send you an article called Influencing Decision Makers about this very topic. Or anybody listening can send me an email. I'll send you an article. And then Peter Drucker said, our mission in life is to make a positive difference, not to prove we're smart and right. Going back to what Michael said, if I need to influence Michael, and he's the decision maker, he's a customer and I'm a salesperson. You got to sell what you can sell. If I can sell it, I sell it. If I can change it, I change it. If I can't sell it and can't change it, let it go. If I can't stand it, I leave. If I'm not going to leave, I make the best of it. I'll send you the article about this. It sounds quite simple. I've made lots of money repeating this seemingly simple advice that Peter Drucker gave me over and over and over again. So, Lakshmi, a very, very good question. Very, very good question. Right. Question number 2, Justin.
Okay, question number 2 comes from Jane Waters, and she writes, you often talk about, and this is directed towards you, Michael, you often talk about your favorite coaching question. What is that question, and why is it your favorite?
Jane, thank you. I appreciate you knowing the work and setting me up with such a nice question. So my favorite coaching, I mean, I like lots of questions, but if I had to say this is my best coaching question, actually, I'm going to give you 2. Best coaching question in the world, AWE, that stands for and what else? And what else? Because remember, the call to be more coach-like is, can you stay curious a little bit longer? And if you could just add one question to your repertoire, and what else is a really great place to start, because and what else comes in with the insight that the first answer is rarely their only answer, and it's rarely their best answer. So when you ask and what else, here's what miraculously happens. Firstly, they almost never hear you ask it, by which I mean it doesn't feel like you're asking a new question. What you're doing is it's somehow you're just expanding the space for curiosity. The other thing that's really powerful about this is it's a self-management tool to manage your advice monster. Because this is what normally happens. You ask a question, they come up with an answer, and your advice monster goes, all right, we've got something to work with here. Tell them something. Show that you're adding value. And if you go, nice answer, what else? What else could you do here? Or what else are you thinking? Or what else is the challenge? Then they're like, oh, I'm going deeper into this conversation. So you get more out of any other question. You stay curious longer. You tame your advice monster. It's really powerful. If I had to give you the question from the Coaching Habit book that I think is the hardest, and maybe it's just for me, but this is the one that I wrestle with most. The question is question number 4, the foundation question. What do you want? What do you want? It looks easy on the surface, but it is a profound question. And if you add and what else, you go, okay, so what do you want? And what else do you want? And what else do you want? And what do you really want? That's when it gets profound and juicy and tricky. And I can tell you this, if you are really clear on what you want, either in the moment or in a small situation or in that bigger piece going, this is what makes for a good life for me, then you will be in a really powerful place to take action and find and pluck the fruit from that harvest to get what you really want. But if you don't know what you want, it's really hard to know what's the best path to get there. So 2 questions, and what else? And what do you want?
Michael, wrapping up. First, thank you so much. Very honored to have you join us today. Probably the biggest selling author of coaching ever. #1 thought leader in coaching, one of the top coaches in the world. So honored to have you join us, being one of our 100 coaches. I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Any final comment to the group before we depart?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate people for investing in their own education and their own self-growth by attending these videos with Marshall and their guests, me today, and the other great guests he's had on over the time. You know, this confusing and discombobulating time is a tricky moment, and we are, lots of us, feeling a bit unsettled. And one of the questions that I'm sitting with at the moment is, who are my teachers? Right now, who are my teachers? And it's a really powerful question, because you've got some people who've served you in the past who may not serve you quite as well now. There are other people out there that you've yet to discover. And I'd encourage you to be thinking about, well, who are my teachers now? Who do I need now to show me a light, point a path outwards, share a tool, share an insight? And I appreciate you being here with me and with Marshall to go, maybe Marshall and I can be part of that for you in some way.
Thank you so much. Finally, Justin, thank you, and the people at Methods. You guys are doing fantastic work. Thanks to Michael. Look forward to everybody being here tomorrow if we can. Same time, same station. Thank you very much. It's my honor to talk to all of you. Hopefully during these hard times, we're going to hopefully try to make your life just a little bit better. So thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.